Now, people say this movie is hard to understand. I really don't see why. Don't lie. You know you always wanted to hear what motherfucker sounded like in reverse. Sounds German. Shit. And thinking about sounding German, I know I said in the past that this looked like a combination between Mission Impossible and a BET version of Steins Gate, but really it's just Dark James Bond. No, yeah, Dark. As in the German show, Dark. Both involve time travel, and more importantly, both obviously have characters who don't know who their fathers are. One sign that you're a great director is when having your name attached to a movie makes people automatically assume your film will be great. Christopher, great-great-great-grandmother fucking Nolan, is one of those legendary directors. I'm not a Nolanite that's gonna drool over every single film he's made, but I do really like his work. Memento was incredible. The Prestige is great.
Shoot me. Come on.
No, I can't.
Shoot me, nigga! Shoot me, nigga!
The Dark Knight is a classic. I loved Inception even more than Portland loves crystal meth. I didn't care for Interstellar or Dunkirk as much as his other previous works, and people probably hate me for that. But again, overall, Nolan's catalog is very strong. His films all exhibit his style of writing and incorporates mind-bending ideas and/or philosophical concepts, and then explores them in unique ways that usually offer satisfying experiences. So when I say, motherfucker, I was hyped for Christopher Nolan's Tenet, motherfucker, I was hyped. I mean, look at this shit. The motherfucking reverse time, the action shit, the white shit. Damn, she's fine as fuck. Look at that beautiful forehead. The spectacle alone was fantastic. It looked great. Tenet was the movie I was most excited for this summer. What the hell else was there to potentially even care about? This shit?
Let's get down to business to defeat the
protesters and anyone else who resists our control.
And we all know this shit was delayed to no end for a certain reason. So after such a long wait, and delay after delay, after delay after delay, shit, I finally got to see Tenet, and I have some things to say. So let me talk to you about a time travel movie that is absolute shit. One that doesn't think about the rules it sets up, and thus has no damn stakes because of it. Oh, yeah, I'm talking about Avengers Endgame. I still continue to bitch about it to this day, but that is absolutely not how to do a time travel movie. Your time travel rules shouldn't be making what your characters are doing completely fucking stupid. If your time travel rules make your objective completely motherfucking easy.
Should have gone. What's good, Nyaka? Nani?
Damn, you have all 6 Infinity Stones, and you have characters go out of their way to make everything harder for themselves because plot. Well, you made a shitty fucking film. But my point of bringing this up is, Tenet is much better than Endgame. At least Tenet actually thinks about the rules of its time travel, and it actually applies it consistently throughout the story. In other words, you're not gonna have a writer in Tenet go and say that he doesn't agree with the director on what the fuck the rules of the time travel were. 1, because it's not a complete fucking mess like Avengers Endgame. And 2, because the writer is Christopher Nolan. And he's the director as well, and he can't disagree with himself, shit. But even with this considered, even considering that the time travel rules are consistent, those roles still weren't used in ways that would make for a satisfying story. I'm not going to get into specific spoilers about why just yet, but I will say this. The problem with Tenet is the script. It really is disappointing, especially for Nolan. Like, you can't lie, this has a lot of problems. And the problems aren't that this film is too complex or hard to understand, though the dialogue is.
I can't hear you!
It goes deeper than that. Though, of course, you have a problem when even the actors aren't clear what the hell is going on.
And I'm like, wait, what?
Like, what did I just read? I don't understand it at all.
Me and John David were just shooting the last scene. I think I was still asking him fundamental questions.
So, I didn't even know the name of my character. I was confused.
That's a really good sign.
But even this isn't the true problem. I mean, newsflash, motherfuckers. No one's complaining about complexity in a Nolan film. In fact, that's one of the reasons we like Christopher Nolan's movies, because he doesn't shy away from having intellectual elements in his movies. He doesn't dumb it down to try to reach an audience, usually. But the point is, absolutely no one that knows about Christopher Nolan as a director is going to go to the theater and not want a complex film. It's like watching a Quentin Tarantino film and not wanting Samuel L. Jackson to call someone motherfucker. You know what you're getting into, and you want to see that. Come on.
Motherfucker. I'm on the motherfucker. Motherfucker. You a smart motherfucker. English motherfucker. Motherfucker. You know all them motherfuckers. Motherfucker. You a fine motherfucker.
He still doesn't say it as much as I do, but you get the point. So everyone wanted that mind-bending script, in typical Christopher Nolan fashion. But let's be honest, you're not getting that here. This is not Nolan's best work because it's not complex, it's just contrived. Nolan can do much better than this. And although I hate to admit it, in my opinion, this film lacks a lot of qualities that made his past movies interesting. It's strange to end up saying that, because I felt the first half of this film was really strong and I was enjoying it. It felt like it was building up to something great. We get context to certain things later. I know people were there are other people that complain about the pacing in the first half, but I completely disagree. I think the first half's pacing is a benefit to it. It was better at exploring its ideas in that half. It was interesting. The main character was doing spy stuff, so, he was cool. Well, I mean, as cool as you can be without having any backstory or really any character traits other than beating someone's ass.
Oh, shit.
But anyway, the main character had potential to be interesting, but he ends up not really being all that. Some people complain about Washington's performance, but I disagree. I think he absolutely has the charisma for the role. But it's just that the script doesn't really do anything for the character at all. They don't even give him a motherfucking name, holy shit. So all they can really tell this motherfucker is look like a spy and try to look like someone that has presence. Well, they don't really even do that. No offense to John David Washington, the bro is out here getting dwarfed in height by literally everyone in the motherfucking movie. When he's next to this character, he makes her look like she should be in the WNBA. This motherfucker is too damn tall. Like, what the hell does she need help from this motherfucker for? She's practically Andre the Giant. She can literally just stand up and squash someone. Still would dance with though, shit. But regardless, the first half of the film is great, in my opinion. Well, I mean, minus the need to have superhuman hearing to make out what the fuck was being said in the dialogue. But then the second act comes and things start to get wobbly, and it becomes more important to make out what characters are saying. You can't really hear, and it's like, okay, all right. But for me, by the third act, specifically the final 30 minutes of the movie, it went completely off the rails. Even if you could manage to hear what the characters said, it still isn't comprehensible, because ultimately what certain characters are doing doesn't make sense. If you actually understand the movie, you will understand that it only makes sense if characters act in ways that are completely idiotic and that don't take account into what they should already know. Ultimately, and surprisingly, you end up with a similar problem that Endgame had, where the stakes are artificial and completely dependent on characters not understanding the time travel rules. This is not the type of narrative that works for this type of time travel. And for me to explain why it's not, I have to go into more detail about the specifics of the time travel rules of the film. So if you don't even want to know that and you want to learn about the time travel in the movie itself, click the time skip. This isn't a spoiler because, again, it's the premise, so there's nothing going to be given away here. But let me explain. So, time inversion. There's this technology that has the ability to reverse an object's entropy and thus make it go backwards in time. It's a great concept. It's very cool. Early on, you see, like in the trailer, for example, a bullet that is going backwards in time, and the flow of cause and effect are switched. So when the motherfucker puts their hand over the bullet, it's like, oh, it goes to them, they catch it. Because to the perspective of the bullet that's going backwards in time, that person dropped it. Again, it's a really cool concept to play around with in a movie, but it depends on two things. One, there's only one timeline. So when these bullets, or objects in general, are going back in time with their entropy reverse, well, there's only one timeline to go back to, okay? And then 2, everything is predetermined. So if they're going back in time, they're destined to go back in time. And certain events that will lead to them ending up where they went will be destined to happen. As in, the motherfucker holding their hand open over the bullet is destined to happen because to the bullet, it's already happened, if that makes any sense. This motherfucker has to have their hand open here, no matter what, because the past is set in stone. And if you reverse the motherfucking object to where the past is the future is also set in stone. So that just means everything is motherfucking set in stone. Does that make sense? The main character, who again doesn't have an actual fucking name, even brings this up. What about free will? What about that? So the point is, the story basically says that there is none, because everything's predetermined. You can't change events that are destined to happen. Now you would think, hey, a Nolan film is going to really go into this idea, this philosophy here. You would think it sets itself perfectly for one of those Nolan shits when a motherfucker is, looking onto the distance and then it cuts to another scene. It's like, I couldn't do this, I couldn't change whatever, you know how he has characters do when they give a monologue and it's, emotional shit.
Well, excuse me, Jay, but I need to get something off my chest. My father hates niggers. And anyone else, really, that doesn't have pure white Aryan blood running through their veins. But I used to watch him and emulate his style. I wanted to be like my father. Doesn't make me a special case, though. But this represents the man I am on and off the field. So every time I think about that black putting his filthy black hands on her purest white, driven snow body, I mean pure, she's a saint, she's an angel. It makes me want to puke.
Okay, I mean, that had nothing to do with free will or a discussion about determinism or any of that shit, but you get what I'm trying to say. If these time travel rules and their implications were explored in the story, you'd have an easy time building emotional stakes. And really, that's something Christopher Nolan's known for. So he's not just putting in mind-bending concepts or crazy ideas in a movie just for the sake of it being in a movie. No, usually he'll explore the implications those concepts have for the characters, and thus, us as the audience. For example, Inception. It's not just about being able to go into dreams and then dreams into dreams. No, the implications of that are explored. So, what's the nature of reality? Can I be sure if I'm dreaming now? What is real? Does it matter? That was all explored for the main character, Carl. Memento isn't just about short-term memory loss, but it's about the implications of it. What are you if you're not your memories? Is it possible for you to grow if you can't make any new memories? What does this mean for your goals? Again, that's explored for Leonard, the main character of the movie. Interstellar isn't just about time dilation for the sake of time dilation. It explores what that means for the characters, what they would have to give up. But I could go on and on about how Nolan pretty much does this for all of his films. So you'd expect the same thing here. That's not really happening this time. The film has concepts, but it's not really asking anything deeper pertaining to those concepts. In Tenet, there was a lot to explore with the ideas that were in the movie. Not just saying, oh, here's time travel, here's time inversion. Oh, everything's deterministic. No, but actually exploring the implications of those ideas for the characters in the movie. Whatever. But no, the story seems not to get this, and even worse, has characters completely ignore this. Characters, specifically villains, act like they're following time travel rules from an entirely different film. And it's like the villains don't understand their own roles. As shown in the film multiple times over and over again, there's only one timeline, and every single event is destined to happen. But apparently, the villains didn't get the motherfucking memo, because their whole entire motivation depends on that not being true. And because of this, there are no actual stakes, because the time travel rules of the film already tell you that what the villains are trying to do isn't even possible. So any little bit of tension in the third act is completely artificial. It's so frustrating because it's just so stupid. It's like the movie saying, hey, these villains aren't actually a threat. but we have to pretend they are. And we hope the audience does too. It is simply not satisfying narratively. Now, of course, the first time watching the third act, like, I couldn't make out what the fuck was going on, or because I couldn't hear shit. You know, this is what you hear. This is what you hear with the shit.
Why do they want to kill us? You're crazy. You don't care about anything, or anyone, or anywhere, or anytime, or anytime.
Yeah, but the thing is, even if you rewatch and learn what they were talking about, it doesn't matter. Because again, the villain's plans are nonsensical, and there's nothing to get. And it's one thing to say that the villains are crazy. That's one thing. But it's another thing to also, on top of that, imply that what they're doing can't happen. You can have villains with motivations that contradict the actual rules of the movie. But as long as them having those motivations still lead to a credible threat, you still have something to watch. But here, it basically tells you that they're not a threat. It's like the motherfucking movie is a spoiler for itself. How the fuck does that even work? But that's pretty much all I can say about the villain's plan without giving away too much. So without spoiling anything, Nolan really needed to rewrite this script. There are certain ways you can make a story such as this nature work, but all of those ways involve emotional stakes for the characters, which again, this film really doesn't have. If you want an example of how to do this, and I'm gonna bring it up again, you gotta watch Dark.
My mom just canceled my brother's
Time travel device order from Amazon.
and he's freaking out.
I'm not gonna spoil the show for you, but I will say that Dark and Tenet use similar time travel rules. Although, of course, they're not exactly the same, they're similar. But there is actual tension in Dark, because not everything is shown to you. And there's always a reason to watch, because there's more to uncover about the characters. The show also, for the most part, has characters act in accordance to what they already know. And what each character tries to do makes more sense according to what they know about the time travel rules. But basically, the protagonists of Dark are underdogs versus time. But in Tenet, the time travel rules are the protagonists.
I see what you did there.
In Tenet, the time travel is the protagonist's best friend. They're not underdogs against fate. They're not underdogs at all. So that's why with Tenet, the absence of character development or any emotional weight to the story is much more detrimental. But let me be fair. Because of course, Christopher Nolan is approaching this as a spy movie. So, you know, like James Bond, Mission Impossible, the focus isn't really inherently on the main character as much as what they're going to be able to do during their mission or journey of the story. And that's perfectly fine if you wanted that. That's perfectly fine. But if we're not gonna get like the typical Nolan movie, then at least give us a top-tier spy adventure. But really, we don't get either. Like, just regular spy movies are better than this. Like, think of Mission Impossible Fallout if you've seen it. Mission Impossible Fallout was incredible. That felt more like a Nolan movie than Tenet. It also had a more interesting plot, more action, and actual stakes. I mean, Tenet was touted as this film that would save cinema. But how the hell was it supposed to do that if it didn't even go beyond its contemporaries in its genre? Taking away the time travel elements, there's not much else in the film that stands out. And even considering how much I enjoyed the first half, there's still spy movies with better first halves, and also that don't have third acts that are complete utter trash. So especially during these days, it's not saving shit. But let me quit, because I don't want it to seem like I'm just being negative for the sake of it being negative, because there's positive things here. This has some of the best special effects you'll ever see, certain ways they edited certain scenes, brilliant. It really is top-tier notch cinematography, okay? So, say what you will, everything else, like down to the visuals, the stunts, the practical effects, they're great. And again, you have to give them points for being creative. They're dealing with ideas that no one else has really thought of. And it's cool to see. It's different. Now, of course, there's some inconsistencies, and I'll get to that. But you know, some of that is expected when you're dealing with imaginary physics like this film is. But again, as I've been repeating for the 11th millionth time, shit, there are certain concepts that do not link up well with what they have built up. I'm hoping that this film gets a sequel, so we can see Nolan get another shot at this. Because again, you can do a lot with the concepts in this film, and heck, if they do that, if they make a sequel, and maybe even a trilogy, maybe we could just be looking back and say, oh, well, I didn't care for the first movie as much, but oh, this trilogy was fire, though. You know, maybe. But I'm talking too much, so let me move on. So I give this film a verdict after the spoiler section. So if you don't want to be spoiled, click the time skip, motherfuckers. Alright, let's move on, chat. Alright, motherfuckers, I'm going into spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled, get the fuck out and click the motherfucking timestamp to the verdict of this shit. Okay? Alright? But by the way, you motherfuckers should subscribe, because if you made it this far, you probably enjoyed this shit. You might as well subscribe for more videos like this. Hey, for the marks. That was me saying subscribe, motherfucker, in reverse. If you have a device that's supposed to destroy the world, and you're in the future, and you put the device in the past, guess what? It didn't fucking happen. The device didn't work, dumbass. There was literally no possible way for the villains to win, unless the movie magically changed its own rules in the third act. But let me explain this ridiculous shit. So the device called the algorithm has the potential to change the entropy of the entire planet. First of all, I think it was a bad idea to call it the algorithm, but okay. The algorithm consists of multiple pieces that come together. When joined, they allow the user to snap everything out of existence. The people in the future are giving time travel technology to Sator to help him gather up the components of the algorithm and use this device in the past to destroy everything because reasons.
Don't try to understand it.
Shut the fuck up. I will fucking laser you with alien fucking eyes and explode your fucking head. I'm motherfucking Kanye West.
Yeah, there's no understanding why the villains want to do what they want to do. Now, for Sator, the fake Russian accent motherfucker, well, at least you say, oh, he's dying of cancer. He wants to kill everyone, and he wants to destroy the world because he's going to die soon too. But, for the motherfuckers of the future, the explanations they give for them makes no damn sense. The film tries to say that during the time of the future, the planet is an environmental wasteland and not inhabitable. That's what Sator whispers very softly to the protagonist, that the people of the future had no choice but to go back in time. I'll get back to that in a second. But one specific scientist of the future was the one that developed the algorithm device. Well, in the future, and she built it as a way to invert the entire world and make everything on the planet go back through time. But of course, after all the work put into making the device, she realizes that this would destroy the past, and if they did that, they'd be killing themselves. Don't know how she never figured that out or even thought about it before going through all the trouble of making the device in the first place, but okay. Well, to prevent the other people of the future from using the device to kill the past and thus killing themselves, she scatters and hides the components of the device in the past and kills herself. This is beyond moronic. Apparently, she is the only one capable of making the device, so she clearly could just destroy it and it will never be made again. But instead, she puts it in the past to be discovered and used where the rest of the people of the future would want to use it. The people in the future wanted to go back in time before it was an environmental apocalypse and use this device anyway. You made it easier for them. It's like trying to prevent Rick Ross from eating the only remaining Krispy Kreme donuts on the planet by hiding the last box of them in his own refrigerator. You're kinda helping him there, but whatever. But again, as dumb as she is, it's even dumber for the other people of the future to want to use the device. Not only did the person that made the motherfucking device tell you, oh shit, this will destroy everything, we can't use this, but there's no benefit to using it anyway, even if it didn't destroy the world. And before I even get in specifics about that shit, look, it's like the movie itself doesn't know what the hell the people in the future even want. They portray them in conflicting ways. On one hand, the movie tries to act like them using the device is the only way for them to survive. But on the other hand, the film portrays them like they just want to kill the people in the past because they blame them for the state of their future and just want to kill them for the hell of it. I mean, without realizing that obviously destroys their future as well. And in that case, this is just the edgelords of the future making a centuries-old okay boomer meme. Seriously, I mean, boomers must really know their generation fucked up when even time travelers from the year 2121 are still blaming their generation for all their problems. Shit. But can you blame them though? But then, on other hand, they portray the people of the future as if they want to dig up the algorithm and have Sator tell them where it is so they can use it in their present and supposedly fix their environment. But none of these scenarios make any sense with what the damn roles of the movie are. Let's say the people in the future wanted to travel back in time before it was an environmental wasteland, and that they wanted that to be their new home, so to speak. Okay, then there's no reason to use the device. You clearly already think that you can go back in time and change the past, so you don't need to destroy the world. Just go back to the past and take over the world using your superior technology, and then you have a new home that you can run on a different course that doesn't lead to an environmental wasteland. But this scenario entirely depends on being able to change the past, something that the movie already rolled out. Let's say the people of the future wanted that second scenario, and they wanted to just destroy the people in the past because they thought them responsible for their current future, and somehow destroying the past would somehow not destroy them as well. Well, in order for that to be the case, then you would have to have multiple timelines. And again, multiple timelines cannot be reconciled with the rules of the film. But even that wouldn't be changing their own past, that would just be changing a different timeline. The people you see as responsible for your future would not be affected at all. It seems like these motherfuckers of the future think they're running on the roles of Back to the Future or some shit, and that if they kill the past, they'll survive, but with some minor differences from their original timeline. But actually no, because those rules would just make them disappear too, so shit. But regardless, according to the rules of the movie, there's only one timeline. And since they can't change events, this is also ruled out. Then, let's look at the third scenario, where they want Sator to tell them where the damn algorithm is so they can dig it up in the future and end up using it in their present. This also wouldn't make sense for multiple reasons. Let's hypothetically say the Phil of the Future motherfuckers actually triggered the device and changed the entropy of the entire planet. But let's just hypothetically also say that this doesn't kill them. Let's just say, this doesn't kill them, even though it does, but it doesn't in this case. Well, if this is remaining consistent with the time travel rules of the film, this is what they would see. 1, they would have already noticed the reverse entropy planet orbiting the solar system way long before they ever triggered the device. And as they triggered it, they would notice the planet converging with their own, until they go back in time and become the shit that they saw. Not sure how the fuck that's supposed to happen, but since this is imaginary physics, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. 2, they wouldn't notice anything different with respect of their own planet. You turning the entire planet back in time doesn't do anything in respect to the planet. You'd notice nothing differently. Time wouldn't seem like it was going backwards because everything would still be going in the same direction on the planet. Does that not make sense to you? So you wouldn't be undoing the environmental wasteland that your world was. Since you're on the planet, you would be going in the same direction as well. So what's the point?
There is none.
The only way this could make any sense, which it doesn't, is if this device only affected the planet itself without any living organisms on the planet. But then, that's also a complete disaster that would kill them, because from their perspective, the Earth would simply disappear. Then, every single living organism would be in the motherfucking vacuum of space, and these motherfuckers are dead, they're dead! And that's because, for an observer that's going forward in time, looking at something else that's going forward in time, that's going to have their entropy reverse, they see both the motherfucker going forward in time and the reverse entropy motherfucker that looks like it's going backwards to their perspective, right? So when they get their entropy reverse, they're not going to see the reverse of what they just saw. See the motherfucker that was going forward in time, they're not going to see that go backwards in time because they're still going forward in time. And they're not going to see the motherfucking reverse entropy motherfucker all of a sudden go forward in time. That's not what they're going to see. They're not going to see anything because neither of those exists at the time that they're in. Does that make sense? The time after they're switched, neither of them are around afterwards. They're both backwards in time. From the original 4 times observer perspective. See, motherfucker, that's why I have the visuals, so you'll understand what the fuck I'm talking about. Oh, shit. So doing this with the entire planet, but not any living organisms in it, is a complete fucking disaster, because they will see the Earth disappear. And even if you were, say, in a spaceship, the only way to get to that reverse time Earth is if you go backwards in time, or eventually that reverse time Earth gets reversed again to go forward in time. But if it never goes forward in time again, you're completely, utterly fucked. But let's say somehow they were able to invert it again a second time so that it would end up going forward in time again. And let's say they fly their spaceship to the damn planet to see how it is. The problem is, this doesn't do much of anything either. When they get to the planet, it will look exactly the same. Because from that planet's perspective, it's still a wasteland going forward in time. And even though it's going backwards from your perspective, when it gets inverted again, it will still be a wasteland going forward in time again. So all 3 potential motivations of the villains of the future completely fail. All of them. So this is what I meant by villains have to act in completely idiotic ways with motivations that contradict their own rules in order for this to make any sense. Because otherwise, this shit doesn't make sense. But the movie tries to take elements from all 3 of these scenarios and use them at the same time in a way to try to fool the audience into thinking that there's more stakes than there actually are. The narrative uses multiple deceptive tactics to try to get you fooled into thinking that all 3 of these are true at different times. Now you might be saying, dances with white chicks, what the hell are you talking about? Only that 3rd scenario for villain motivation that you talked about is true. The people of the future want Sator to bury the algorithm, tell them where it is so they can find it in their present and use it. They were not physically traveling back in time via cryogenics or through generations to make it to present day. No, they are still in the future, and they want to use it then. People like this will argue this film only wants the 3rd scenario to be true. But that's only technically correct, because the film blatantly lies about this. See, the final battle is set up as if the threat is instantaneous, and that they have to stop what is happening or the world will cease to exist instantly. But this has no basis in anything, even discounting the stuff I just talked about 5 minutes ago. To get you to think that this is some instantaneous threat, the film blatantly lies to you in the form of what characters say. You need look no further than the setup on this ship scene that happens before the final battle. This is where the protagonists, Neil and Kat, are discussing Sator's plan. They bring up that Sator has the fitness tracker. Does this motherfucker look like he cares about fitness? That should have been a dead giveaway. Well, anyway, they bring up that Sator has a fitness tracker that is going to act as a dead man's switch. The implication is, if Sator dies, that this fitness tracker will make it so that the algorithm is triggered.
Are you kidding me? I need to talk to a manager.
The protagonist, in his own words, says his death activates the algorithm. He dies, the world ends. The characters also explain that Sator has cancer and he's dying, and he's taking the world with him. And they also explain how Sator is going back 10 days in the past during the time of his vacation because he views that as the last good moment of his marriage. Kinda convenient that it was only 10 days ago.
I remember it like it was last week. Matter of fact, I think it was last week.
But whatever, that's not the point. Kat says in her own words that Sator wants to go back to that gold moment, have it be his last. And the protagonist responds, everyone's last. So again, they imply that this will be the moment of the world ending. Okay, so tell me, what do all of these things make you think? Do you think A, that his death will mean the instant destruction of the world, so you have to prevent that? Or do you think B, that Sator's death will mean you only have hundreds of years to dig up the world-ending device and prevent it from being used in the future? Unless you are a motherfucking liar. You will admit that no reasonable person is going to hear those words and assume B is correct. But the truth is B. All Sator's dead man switch does is send an email. Yes, this email is to the people of the future, telling them the location of where he buried the algorithm. This is so fucking stupid. There is no danger from Sator's fitness tracker sending an email to the people of the future. Hello? They're in the fucking future? And this email is sent before these motherfuckers were even born. How the fuck does the world end once he sends the email? Even if the motherfuckers of the future activate the algorithm, they have to wait till they're, fucking alive. Not to mention the obvious fact that if Sator did send the email, the people of the future would already have access to it. But that's not even what's dumb about this. What's so mind-numbingly stupid about this is, this setup makes it so that even if the protagonist and his organization were to fail, with the algorithm buried and Sator dead, it doesn't fucking matter. There's no imminent threat. So Sator is burying the algorithm, and everybody knows where the fuck it is. If it ends up still in there, by the time the people of the future get to it, the world ends. Why not just fucking dig it up? Hello? It's a world-ending device. Oh, it's in the ground, so the fuck what? The people in the future are gonna dig it up? Why don't you do it? You have hundreds of fucking years to do so.
Hey, keep digging.
Just dig it up. You have centuries before you have to. You don't have to do it in a day. You could do it. You could take a year, motherfucker. You could take a decade. If you're worried about Sator finding out that you're digging up the algorithm, just wait until he inevitably went back in time. Problem fucking solved. So, what the hell are the stakes here? And here's what I'm talking about. This is what is deceptive about this. The movie actually wants you to misunderstand this. It doesn't want you to understand that all Sator's Dead Man Switch does is send an email. Because if you do understand that, and you understand the rest of the rules that the movie brought up, well, this is completely fucking busted. You're rightfully so going, this is stupid. This is fucking stupid. You would realize that there is actually nothing about sending the email that would lead to an instantaneous doom like the movie portrays. What's the difference between the moment he dies and the second afterwards? Or the second after that? Or the day after that? Or the week after that? There isn't one. There's no reason why this machine, the algorithm, would magically destroy this world at that certain time, at that given moment, if it was activated in the future. Nothing follows from this. There's nothing logically coherent that makes that make any sense. So it doesn't want you to actually understand that. What it absolutely wants you to think is that Sator is going to activate the algorithm in the past. Again, the protagonist in his own words says his death activates the algorithm. He dies, the world ends.
You lie! You lie!
This is a blatant fucking lie. But because of this lie, and other quotes that are saying this will be the last moment of the world, clearly not. Because of that, you get a false sense of what they're trying to stop. And again, that is completely intentional, because the third act actually has no stakes. Even if the algorithm was buried, they'd have all the time in the world to dig it back up. There's nothing that matters here. The people of the future, the only way that they could get the algorithm, even knowing the location, is if the other characters are dumb enough to keep it there. They could have killed the shit out of Sator, and it wouldn't have meant shit. And guess what? Kat actually does. She kills him, and nothing fucking happens. They already know where the algorithm is, and even though they lifted it out, if they didn't, it wouldn't have fucking mattered. And the movie tries to cover that fact up. But just in case you still don't believe me that they're using these multiple different scenarios I talked about at the same time, consider this. The protagonist during that battleship scene with Kat and Neil says this: "We have to lift the algorithm from the dead drop without Sator knowing. If he believes it's there, he kills himself." Neil responds, "And then the rest of us."
It's the end of the world!
Again, this interaction makes you think that Sator isn't burying it for the people of the future, he's burying it in the ground to activate it himself. Again, they imply with this, algorithm in the ground, Sator dead, end of the world. They imply that. but that's not the case at all. But the movie still tries to pretend it is. Like it is instant. So it is closer to scenario 1 and 2, where Sator is using the algorithm in the past. When you hear the protagonist put an emphasis on how important it is that Sator not know that they're lifting the algorithm out of the dead drop, well, that makes you think that if he finds out they're digging it up, he'll kill himself immediately and then activate the algorithm then, and everyone's dead. But again, since Sator's death actually doesn't matter at all, it doesn't matter if they fucking tell him that they're digging it up. They could call him up on the phone and be like, hey, I'm digging this shit up. And actually they did! Because he's talking to them! He was talking to them! So, which of these scenarios are true? You can say it's scenario 3, but they're using elements from scenario 1, scenario 2, by trying to make this an instant threat. You can't get around it. This is all by design, and intentionally deceptive. I simply can't criticize this enough. There is nothing intelligent or nuanced about this at all. It's utterly fucking stupid. It's one thing to have a plot that is vague about what characters are doing and what is happening. But it's an entirely different thing to have a plot where characters lie about what is happening to purposely mislead the audience. What Nolan wrote for the third act depends on people misunderstanding what he's setting up. And he uses cheap tactics to get you to misunderstand. Through character dialogue, through being vague. I can't even fucking hear what characters are saying if they were clarified. Those are cheap tactics. So when people say, oh, well, the film is confusing, it's just confusing. No, it's not confusing. It's just nonsensical. And Nolan tries to hide that by being vague as possible to try to make things apply to multiple possibilities of plots at the same damn time. And I already know someone's gonna go, but that's also white chicks. They already had Neil explain the email shit in the dialogue before.
You still don't get it, do you?
Let's actually look at that dialogue that happened on the ship scene as well. When talking about the fitness tracker and the dead man's switch setup, Neil says it'll be linked to a switch. The way is simple. An email burst that reveals the location of the dead drop. Sets afire, his heart stops. See how poorly written that is? Sets afire, his heart stops. Why would you use this figurative language here when trying to describe this?
The spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the...
Nigga, shut the fuck up with that African mumbo jumbo.
This doesn't literally set a fire. It doesn't... No, the fire he's talking about is the people of the future getting the email. So, but the reason it's used is intentionally to get you to think of imagery like a bomb, like something, a fuse going off. Makes you think typical doomsday device. That's trying to confuse you, because that's not the case at all. Just say what the hell you want to say when you're explaining something. Now's not the time to use figurative language. If we take it literally, it gives us a different context completely. It pisses me off. But really, you know that shit is intentional. And heck, even when they were talking about the algorithm and the protagonist says, pissing in the wind, and Neil's like, oh, well, the algorithm will reverse the direction of that wind. What the fuck? And then he says, the algorithm reverses the entropy of the world. Okay? So I just assume reverse the entropy of the entire planet. That's what you said. Or is how Neil's defining world in this case different? Does he mean like their timeline branch, or does he mean their universe? Please be more specific. But you know what we have here, it's almost like they want the algorithm to do something differently than what they claimed it did, because nothing links up and nothing makes sense. And you know what? Everything I'm saying right now doesn't even motherfucking matter. None of these follow the time travel rules that the film built up. Whether scenario 1, scenario 2, or scenario 3 is correct, none of them are consistent with the rules of the film. But you'll probably never be sure which one they were going for anyway. But regardless, because of this, it's a very unsatisfying third act. And it's one where you already know the outcome, and you know that the protagonists are going to win, no matter what. And they have to, based on the rules of the damn movie. If they wanted this final battle to be the same, here's what they should have done. They should have had it happen in the future, or at least during a time that we, as the audience, hadn't seen past. So then there would be a question of, maybe they use this device and that's the reason why the people of the future end up in this desolate wasteland, because it's actually the device that caused it. So there you have a little bit of confusion and a little bit of mystery behind it. And then you could say, oh, yeah, there's a bit of tension there. You can still make a satisfying narrative out of that. But no, as it stands, they decided to have this in the past. And literally the entire film before this was a spoiler, because newsflash, it wasn't destroyed. The world is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong. The protagonist and everybody else on the damn planet has already lived through this so-called world-ending event that obviously didn't happen. I mean, that's so bad that even Nolan had to have the protagonist ask that himself.
Wasn't us being here now, and it never happened.
Your presumption is correct, nigga.
And the funny thing is, the character Nil, played by Robert Pattinson, that motherfucker, the character tries to just dismiss this and like, oh, but that doesn't matter. Optimistically, you're probably right, but it doesn't matter.
Nigga, what the fuck?
Of course it matters. Timelines matter, motherfucker. If there's only one, with events that can't be changed, then why are we even watching this? I don't care if Nil is just going, oh, well, it might be destined for us to win, but we can't just sit back and do nothing. No, you already took all attention away from the story. The movie brings up the grandfather paradox over and over and over again. But what the movie doesn't understand is that it already has an answer for the grandfather paradox. It already answers it by clearly showing that there's only one timeline that is deterministic, with events that can't be changed by reverse entropy objects. Every time in the film, for every single object or person that's getting their entropy reversed, they and anyone watching will already see the reverse time duplicate going backwards in time. They'll always see the reverse time cells backtracking to the machine at the exact same moment that they go into it. And that means there's nothing to change, as that reverse time person was already in the timeline. And now that you became that duplicate from your perspective, you're just making what already happened happen. And again, this will happen every single time you reverse your entropy. It doesn't matter if you were hypothetically going back in time to go into the machine to go forward in time again. Because again, you'll see your time duplicate going back into the machine as you approach it as well. So again, that duplicate already exists. I'm not gonna do a motherfucking proof by induction on this shit, but you get the point. But the only reason I bring this up is what it says about the grandfather paradox. It quite clearly tells you everything you need to know. It's this that makes everything set in stone. Meaning it says, no dumbass, you can't go back in time and kill your own grandfather because it didn't already happen. And to do so is already predetermined to fail. You can't change the events that lead to your grandfather fathering your dad and your dad fathering you. In fact, you can't change one aspect about how it happens at all, not even down to a position of one motherfucking particle. If you end up trying to interfere, well, that's just a story your granddad didn't tell you, but it already happened. Now, it's one thing for certain characters like the protagonist not to know about the time travel rules. Well, of course, the motherfucker's learning about it. He's not sure about it exactly.
Fuck all this bullshit, what the fuck?
But there is no excuse for the motherfuckers of the future, the ones that are responsible for developing this technology in the first place, to not know how this works. Now, Sator's not off the hook either, but the motherfuckers of the future, they have plenty of opportunity to test if they can make a different timeline. They don't need a motherfucker like Sator, who's hundreds of years in the past, to help them try to do this shit. They don't need to spend all this time burying and digging shit on the ground to try to talk to this motherfucker to see if he could change the timeline. They don't even have to risk killing anyone or killing themselves yet. They don't have to do that. They can do this shit in 5 minutes. See if your inverted self can go back in time, invert themselves again, and then give yourself a haircut. If you were somehow able to give yourself a haircut you obviously didn't get, then you know that the timelines are different. But if you're never ever able to make anything that happened differently, and you're not able to get to yourself to give yourself a haircut, well, there's only one timeline. That should be the assumption. Or even simpler, try not to do what you see your reverse time self did. If you see the motherfucker approach the machine, quickly duck out and like, I'm not going in. I'm not going in. If you saw your reverse time self standing, motherfucker lay down on the ground or some shit. If you see what your duplicate does, which is your future reverse time self, and you can change it, you can change the past. Otherwise, you don't have any evidence that you can create a different timeline trying to do what you're doing. And look, I get it. It's a film, it's a movie. You don't have to have villains be, they have to have a concrete motivation that completely makes sense. Some motherfuckers just want to destroy the world. I get it. That's okay, that's fine. But this is contrived to the point where it gets in the way of the plot. If the villain's plan doesn't follow, how the hell do you expect us to follow the third act? The entire setup is broken from its foundation, and that's the true reason why people feel like they're confused. The truth is, they're actually not confused at all. There's just nothing to understand because this is written like bullshit. Oh, and it also doesn't help that these motherfuckers are just shooting in the thin air. Well, what the fuck were they shooting at? You can't even see who the fuck they're shooting at, bro. I don't like. So all that leads to why I completely hate the third act. I think it's terrible. I think the third act is absolutely something that brings down the entire film. It really does. Narratively, it takes down everything in this film, and it's so frustrating, so annoying, and I don't know why no one told Nolan, hey, maybe you should rewrite this or reconsider this. I don't know why. But I've said what I needed to say about the third act. I should move on. Shit. This is gonna be longer than the film at this point, isn't it? Fuck. Oh, and by the way, Neil dies. I didn't really care. Sorry, but I didn't really care about the character. I didn't feel like the protagonist or Neil had any camaraderie. Like, it was the team, it was the duo, it was a friendship. Not really. I mean, it's like, work buddies. Do you really give a fuck about that motherfucker? No. And do I think the protagonist even cared that Neil died?
No, nigga!
I mean, the protagonist barely even trusted the motherfucker. I mean, the last 30 minutes, he's still going, I don't trust you, motherfucker. Tell me what you know. The reason he couldn't tell anything, though, is because Neil was recruited by him, the protagonist, in the past, and it's his future self that will do this. So I guess Neil was trying to avoid any paradoxes happening that will make the protagonist act differently than he actually did, or know something that he shouldn't know at the time. Hey, at least someone in this film's doing something right. But overall, that character connection just wasn't there. But really, they could have done a lot with the premise of a friend that was destined to die. You could have had this whole theme of fighting fate and make his death more integral to the main story. As it is now, it's just like, the motherfucker died. Okay, shit. The film wants to treat Neil's death as this huge tragedy, but you just watch it like it happened and it doesn't really have any impact at all. And hey, that's not exclusive to Neil. That's pretty much everybody. The protagonist, Kat, Sator. I mean, they just do what they do, and that's it. Again, there's just not really any emotional weight here, despite cast members saying this was an
incredibly human story.
Not really. As I said in the non-spoiler section, the focus of the movie really isn't on the characters, it's really more on the spy action aspect. And again, that's okay, that's the choice they wanted to make. In my opinion though, the plot isn't good enough to warrant not having the characters being on point. But again, I'm not against the character of Neil, but maybe in the future they can expand on the character and their interaction with the protagonists and their friendship can really seem more believable and more authentic. But anyway, I'm moving on, motherfuckers. So let's talk about the interrogation scene. Now, believe it or not, I actually have some positive things to say. First and foremost, this is one of the most mind-blowing moments in the movie, and I think it pays off. It's actually real fun to watch. Now, Sator is inverted, meaning he's going back in time, and he's interrogating the protagonist, who is going forward in time. And believe me when I tell you, it's crazy how they made this work. So Sator has this device that will record his audio, reverse that audio, and then play it. And he's doing this in reverse time. So to the motherfuckers going forward in time, they hear the recording first. And they hear it as if he was talking normally. And then they hear Sator with his that shit. His reverse audio. And it's really funny, because Sator's yelling like a motherfucker. He's losing his shit. But when you hear the recording, his mouth isn't moving. So it's like, what the hell? But then you hear, whoa, 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 whoa. It's so fun.
Now fuck off my board! 12 seconds later.
And then, just when Sator is about to be caught by these motherfuckers, who came the fuck out of nowhere on some Call of Duty shit.
About 5 or 6 guys spawned right in front of me.
Sator flees to the inside of the machine, which reverses his entropy. And then we get to see his perspective. And then you see this whole entire conversation happening in reverse. I really like that, because it was the first time you actually got to see what the machine actually does. Now, when you first see this shit before Sator goes into the machine, you don't know what the fuck is going on, because it's so disorienting and it happens at such a fast pace that it takes some time for you to even process what the hell is going on in this thing. But once it gets in the machine, you start to get that context there, and it makes more sense. And again, this is actually the first time the film shows how the machine works. I mean, technically, we saw this in the first airport scene, but we didn't have enough context for that. It wasn't really that clear. But anyway, this scene does a good job of showing how someone going backwards in time would interact with someone going forwards in time. So every moment forward for the person that's inverted, the person they're interacting with knows less and less of what they're talking about. Sator even has to count down and count up. And he has to count in both directions. It's crazy. But unfortunately, and I promised I would get to it, there is one huge problem with this scene. And the problem has to do with Kat's wound. Now, during this interrogation, Sator threatens to shoot Kat. It's kind of funny because the main character really has no one that he cares about, or at least no family. So the villain's just pretty much like, fuck it, I'm gonna threaten my own wife. Now sure, the protagonist is portrayed as this nice person. He doesn't want this motherfucker to die. But imagine if he didn't care.
Are you listening to me? Since you have no meaningful relationship with any character in the film, life and narrative share of minimum business, I will fucking shoot my own wife if you don't tell me where it is, bro.
Nigga, I don't give a fuck. Oh, pulling on again.
You might be saying, this is white chicks. Who the fuck makes a thug life meme in 2020? But if it's going backwards in time, it's not outdated. It's ahead of its time. Yeah, I really need to just end this shit at this point. Well, anyway, Sator threatens to shoot Kat, and he actually does. Kat is left with a wound, and that's why they have to go back and invert her, because the radiation from the bullet that was going backwards in time is going to kill her. And going backwards in time is the only way to make that wound not radioactive anymore. I can buy that, but the fact is, according to the movie's own rules, Kat shouldn't have this wound to begin with. Now let me explain. In order to injure someone who is going the opposite direction of time from yourself, you need to 1. Already see them injured, and 2. Have a weapon that is going in their direction of time. So, a weapon that is backwards from your perspective. Think about this, motherfuckers. Okay, from the perspective of a motherfucker going backwards in time, the first time they notice someone else, if that person isn't hurt, you cannot hurt them in the future of their perspective. From the very first moment that you notice someone going in an opposite direction of time from yourself, you have seen what their subjective future looks like. So every moment forward for yourself is their subjective past. So if they're not hurt there, they weren't hurt before. So there's nothing you can do. And in fact, anything you would be trying to do would just be undoing it. You could punch a motherfucker, but that would just be unpunching the motherfucker. You could slice a motherfucker's arm off, but that would be just putting it back on. you could shoot the motherfucker in the head, and you'll be bringing them back to life. That's because in Tenet, both the past and the future are set in stone. And if you're looking at someone's future and they're alive and kicking and they're all good, then no matter what you do, they will end up exactly like that in their subjective future, just as you saw. A more concrete example for you to get this is to think about the airport fight. Well, both versions of it. Now, sure, this is the protagonist and his backwards time self, but let's just say they weren't, and they were two different people. And what I mean by that is, let's just hypothetically say protagonist 1 could kill protagonist 2 going back in time. Okay, alright? Well, anyway, you notice that in order for protagonist 2 to be injured when he's going backwards in time, he had to already have a wound. And Neil points out that he actually has a wound right before this scene. Neil's like, "Oh shit, motherfucker, you're bleeding. Oh, we gotta check that arm." Or something along those lines. And all of a sudden, the protagonist has a wound in his arm. So, what's the significance of this? Well, this wound is what protagonist 1 will give protagonist 2 during that hallway fight. But because protagonist 2 is going backwards in time, he experiences this differently. The effect comes before the cause, in the perspective of protagonist 2. So, he's already hit by this, the wound is already there, and then when he fights his past self stabs him with the knife, but he's unstabbing him. So he's getting rid of the wound through the knife hit, if that makes any sense. Of course it doesn't, but you know, that's the logic of the movie, shit. Now sure, this might be insane, you might be saying, well, this isn't physically possible. Of course not. But we're just following the logic of the movie right now, motherfucker. The point is, this proves that 1, you cannot injure someone that's going in an opposite direction of time as yourself unless they already have an injury. And you have a weapon that is going in their direction of time. Because protagonist 1 only has a weapon that's going his direction of time, it's not going in the same direction as protagonist 2. And thus, it cannot injure him. It can only undo his injury. Sure, from protagonist 1's perspective, he thinks he's stabbing the shit out of protagonist 2, but he's not. What he actually did was undo a wound that protagonist 2 already had. Does that make sense? To the protagonist that's going backwards in time, he just did himself a favor by undoing the wound. Protagonist 1 and protagonist 2 cannot hurt each other unless they both had weapons going the direction of their opponent. So protagonist 1 would need a weapon that is going backwards in time in order to hurt protagonist 2. And protagonist 2 would need a weapon that is going forward in time in order to hurt protagonist 1. And this is pretty much the only time something like a reverse time gun would come in handy. If protagonist 1 had a reverse time gun, he could kill protagonist 2. But again, from his perspective, he would have already seen him dead. Protagonist 1 would see the bullet come from protagonist 2's corpse and go in his gun. So, like they always say, catch the motherfucking bullet. And that same exact event from protagonist 2's perspective is the gun shooting into him. In his subjective future, him ending up dead. Okay? So what does this have to do with Kat's wound? Well, in the interrogation scene, Kat is going forward in time. The same as the protagonist, and the same as this glass, which I assume is going forward in time as well. That means that the protagonist, the shattered glass, and Kat should all share the same perspective because they are all going forward in time. When this motherfucker Sator goes into the machine, reverses his entropy, and goes in reverse time, his weapon is also in reverse time, the same direction as himself. And if you don't believe me, just consider what the protagonist saw from his perspective. He's going forward through time. He saw Sator's weapon as if he caught the bullet instead of shooting it. Therefore, Sator's weapon is going the same direction as himself. This means this is not the same direction of the person he's trying to hurt, which is Kat in this case. So, Kat's wound should have been in the past, because all Sator can do right now is unshoot her. He cannot damage her future at all. And this is undeniably inconsistent with the rules that they have brought up. and there's no way you can get around this. For example, there might be an argument here that the glass might not be in forward time, and that is actually in backwards time, is in the same time as Sator. So for example, think of the air. The only reason why Sator doesn't need a mask on the other side is, I guess, that other side is filled with reverse time air. Air that's going in the same direction as himself. I mean, shit, motherfucker. I can understand the air going back through time, shit. But every single other material, like, oh, come on. They got a chair over there, that shit's back in time. They got a motherfucking door, that's shit back. I don't buy that. But let's just go along with that and assume that entire side is running on reverse time, meaning that even the glass is running backwards in time, okay? That still doesn't change shit, because the protagonist and Kat still are both going forward in time. And since the protagonist saw the bullet being caught by Sator, he should have also seen a wound that Kat had being healed by Sator's gunshot. The same way that the protagonist got a wound before his opposite time self stabbed him, is the same way Kat should have had a wound developed before Sator shot her, or reverse time shot her, I should say. And this is a colossal problem, because Kat's wound is the entire reason they go back to the airport, and it's the entire reason for the next scene. But unfortunately here, the setup isn't following its own rules. Kat's wound should be in the past, when the protagonist was during the car chase watching how Sator had her at gunpoint. Kat should have the wound right there, in the same way that he developed his wound before he was even stabbed in his perspective. So this is a blemish on what was otherwise a very good scene. Now of course, this is nowhere near as bad as the writing for the villains, but this is another part of the movie that could have been rewritten, and you could have had a different plot that would have been more cohesive with the roles they brought up. I said before that the time travel was consistent, and that, okay, this movie really thinks about its roles, but that's with the time travel itself. When it comes to other little things about time inversion and reverse time weapons, things of that nature, it can get wonky. So I should move on. But there's one last thing. I know. Shit. We're all in. Okay. But one last thing, motherfuckers. Another concept that the film had was having a fire that's going backwards in time makes something colder. So that motherfucking car that the protagonist was in, when Sator lights his match on the shit, the fire makes it turn to ice. Because instead of the heat transferring to whatever it's touching is transferring its heat to it. That's going backwards in time. We're thinking about a chemical reaction going back in time? That doesn't make sense. But okay. Anyway, this flame makes the car the protagonist was in turn into ice, and it freezes the protagonist, and he wakes up. Okay, he's like, oh, I didn't explode, I just had a hypothermia. What the fuck? Wait, first of all, you're going the same direction as that flame, so it doesn't matter. In your perspective, that fire should feel exactly the same. But regardless, don't we remember in the movie that the ice should have made you feel hot? Right? Like, this motherfucker should have caught flame when touching the ice in the car. Because the car's not inverted, the car's going forward in time. It's just that the forces acting against it aren't, but whatever. It's time to conclude this video. So, you motherfuckers want a verdict. And I already know I'm gonna be crucified, but that's okay, it doesn't matter. Let me say this. The first act is a 9 out of 10 for me. It's that level, it's that good. Second act is an 8 out of 10. You know, has some problems, but it's still really good. Third act, I have to say, it was a 3 out of 10 for me. Because of what it revealed, contradictions in the plot, just so much that it took away from the entire film. So what I gotta say is, really this film is a 6.7 out of 10. And it's not completely terrible. There's a lot of great things in it. But it misses out on so many of the basics, like making your characters easy to hear, having emotional stakes, having characters that matter, and having a story that doesn't spoil itself. Come on and honestly ask yourself, do you think this is Christopher Nolan's best work? No, not at all. And in a way, I think it's kind of disrespectful to pretend like it is. Tenet is not Christopher Nolan's masterpiece. Tenet is Christopher Nolan's disappointment. This was not a rich story with complex layers that are going to be discussed for years, because upon examination, the story doesn't hold up. Instead of being a film we all anticipated to be a gloriously satisfying mind-bending thriller, this was a film that actually required you to turn your brain off and ignore its inconsistencies, so you'd be able to pretend you were thrilled. It felt like it wasn't really a meaningful watch, but hopefully, Christopher Nolan gets a sequel and does better with this material, because it does have a lot of potential, and it would be a shame if everything in this film just went to waste on one botched attempt. So Tenet was disappointing, but I hope to see a better sequel.
But who the hell knows if this will get one, considering it got a motherfucking box office going backwards in time too. Motherfuckers getting refunds from the perspective.
So, that's what I thought. And well, I didn't even introduce myself. Well, not in reverse time.
Greetings, motherfuckers! Dances with White Chicks here.
If you watched this whole entire shit, I recommend you subscribing to the channel and hitting that notifications bell. Because hey, what the hell else are we doing with our lives? Hopefully this video goes over well, you know, all that shit, you know. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention this, but Michael Caine knocks this out the park. He's the best character in this film. Every scene he's in, he does great.